Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Dom, for introducing me, and thank you very much for being here, everyone. So,
Wonderful.
yeah,
We'll just pass over the controls to you now, and you may begin your presentation.
sure.
Perfect.
So today I'm going to talk about well-being in adult language education, and in particular, why I believe it's not just a nice extra, but actually central to learning success. Most adults don't struggle with languages because of grammar or vocabulary or difficult pronunciation. They struggle because of how they feel. And now I'll show you my lesson plan or session plan. So first of all, we'll start with an introduction, adult learners and the realities they bring into the classroom. Point 2 is the missing piece in language learning research, emotions and well-being and second language acquisition. After that, I'll introduce two key frameworks, the PERMA model and self-determination theory. Then we'll move into practical teaching strategies for well-being, or how can we foster autonomy and competence and relatedness, and how can we reduce anxiety and um, uh, create a state of flow in the classroom. And then I look at the wider learning ecosystem, independent learners, those who learn by themselves with different methods and um, different instruments, and at teacher well-being as well. And then we'll conclude the session with the key points and also with some questions that you can ask me. And before we begin, I would like to get a quick sense of who is in the room. So poll 1, please.
Okay. So, are you a translator, interpreter, language educator, linguist within the BPG sector or other? Feel free to add if you're in other in the comments in the chat as questions panel as well. We'll keep this open for a while to give people a chance to vote on this first poll. Of course, many of you will be more than one of these things as well, so just pick what you feel most applies to you. Okay, I think we can get close to sharing these results, so just hold it open just a couple more seconds. There's a few more votes coming in, and 1, 2, 3. So we have translator 53%, interpreter 17%, language educator 9%, linguist within the BPG sector 13%, and other there as well with 8%. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So there's a great diversity of professions, and it's a great mix. And I'm sure many of you will have a portfolio career, as they say. And this is certainly also true for me. So I'm an experienced tutor of German, Russian, and French, working in adult education since 2005. I'm a tutor at CityLit since 2020. I also develop courses, including literature, film, history, and culture-based courses. Also, of course, traditional language courses on grammar, vocabulary, etc. And I teach both online and in physical classrooms, and I try to support learner confidence, fluency, and progression. I'm also an experienced examiner and moderator and exam author for the CIOL, FCDO, for GCC exams. And my qualifications include an MA in translation from the University of Heidelberg in Germany, a master's in management and publishing from a French business school, ECP, the IOLET diploma in translation, and a CELTA teaching qualification. So my first career was in publishing, including scientific and educational publishing. I worked in different publishing companies in Paris and in London at the beginning of my career. And I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Linguists and the Chartered Linguist, and I help linguists through the mentoring scheme at the Institute. So let's begin, and let's now turn to the learners themselves. So what is their reality? What do they bring into the classroom? So of course, everyone has seen this Maslow's pyramid, as it is called, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so why do people learn languages? Most students I see, their motivation comes from the upper three levels of this pyramid. So social needs for love and belonging. So they might have family ties in Germany or in France or in Russia. They might have some friends or a partner who speak that language, and they would like to communicate with family members, with loved ones in that language. Then, of course, socially, it is better accepted to have a better qualification. So a lot of them are seeking to pass exams and to use languages in their professional activity. Then, of course, self-esteem is important, because when you learn a skill, your self-esteem grows, of course. And then self-actualization, so is sort of the supreme level of that pyramid. And this is something people want to achieve. But actually, that's the typical adult learner, perhaps at CITILIT or in other adult education colleges, or even an independent learner. However, in my practice, I also taught people for whom learning a language was very important for safety and for meeting their physiological needs. A few years ago, I taught English to refugees. I was a volunteer, and for them, it was vital to speak the language, to be able to work, to find a place to live, etc. So it can be the whole pyramid of those needs. And this is my favorite painting in the National Gallery. So what is the supreme goal of every language learner is to speak meaningfully in a correct manner. And this is the allegory of grammar, which is there is something like grammar is for the mind, is like water for flowers or for plants. Right, so I touched upon some motivations. So of course, career development, exams, relocation, and intellectual interest. So some people are very interested in history, for example. They want to be able to read original historical documents or original works of literature. As I said, family ties as well. And in daytime classes, there are quite a lot of retired students, and they want to learn a language to mark a major life transition. So, for example, retirement or also recovery from illness. So quite a few students over the years recovered, for example, from a stroke, and hoped that learning language would increase their cognitive abilities. Bereavement and other personal situations. So I met students from diverse professional and personal backgrounds, lawyers quite a lot, because London is of course a center of international business and law, and scholars, for example, a scholar on German history quite recently, and artists and performers who want to move abroad and perform there. So there is also a need for personal growth, purpose, and cognitive stimulation. Adults are balancing complex lives, work, family, and other commitments. So you have to, for example, be careful with not giving too much homework. And they all share one goal, which is building confidence and connection, and their lives are enriched through language learning. What is the traditional view of language learning? Traditionally, language learning has been viewed mainly as a cognitive process. The focus has been on things like aptitude, memory, and teaching methods. And learners are often seen primarily as processors of information. And success is measured through accuracy and performance. So in a typical, for example, school classroom, there will be a test and you'll see how many % you got right. But in adult education, unless it's a preparation for a specific exam, it's more complex than that. Because success is not only due to accuracy and performance. It leaves something very important out, this traditional view. And there is an important missing piece in traditional language teaching, which a well-known psychologist and educationalist Jean-Marc Dewell described the elephant in the room. And this elephant in the room are emotions. And language learning involves a whole range of emotions, so anxiety, enjoyment, frustration, confidence, and learners often experience an emotional roller coaster throughout the lesson. And these emotional states directly affect engagement, participation, and progress. And in my own teaching, I see learners who understand the material particularly very well, but hesitate to speak because they are afraid of making mistakes. And sometimes old trauma is resurging. For example, a teacher who criticized the student too much when they were in school, or self-criticism, I'm rubbish at languages. That's something that I hear regularly, and it makes me very sad because nobody is inherently rubbish at languages. We all learn our native language very successfully. So these emotions affect participation and also progress. So why well-being matters? It's not just about feeling comfortable. It has a direct impact on motivation, persistence, and confidence, and ultimately on whether learners will continue learning or whether they will drop out. What are the influences, main influences for the learner's well-being? Their motivation, persistence, and self-confidence. So these are the three cornerstones of learning. And if a learner has a positive emotional experience, they have a feeling of personal growth and success, they will have better learning outcomes. And well-being is not an add-on, but a core condition for learning, not only languages, but in general. So now we'll talk about key frameworks, the PERMA model and self-determination theory. So let's start with PERMA. So this was developed by an American psychologist, professor of psychology, Martin Seligman, and he looked at this question, what helps learners flourish? And a framework for understanding human well-being that he developed involves 5 core elements. So it's, first of all, positive emotion, so enjoyment, interest, satisfaction in learning, then engagement. So deep involvement, focus, losing track of time. So that's very important. Then you have relationships. So supportive, meaningful social connections. And in long-standing language learning groups, there are a lot of friendships and a lot of camaraderie that comes about. It's very nice to see that group dynamic. Then meaning, sense of purpose and personal relevance. So for example, if we choose topics in a language lesson that are relevant to the student's life, they will be more engaged. And then accomplishment, progress, achievement, mastery. So these elements are individually important, but they are also interdependent. So well-being here is not just about feeling happy all the time. It's multidimensional. So how do we apply this model to language learning? So how can those elements be present in a language learning classroom so that learners are more motivated and resilient? So first of all, positive emotion, enjoyable, low anxiety learning environment. So we don't bombard learners with information, they feel safe, they feel positive about the lesson. Then engagement, interactive tasks, so a lot of dialogues, role plays, etc. And meaningful communication. So for example, learning how to accomplish some practical tasks like writing an email, for example, or doing some shopping in a foreign country. Relationships, so peer interaction and the supportive community is very important, meaning linking learning to personal goals, and finally accomplishment. So the progress has to be made visible, the goals should be achievable, and the feedback should be constructive. Another theory which can be applied to language learning is the self-determination theory, SDT. It was developed by psychologists Ryan and Deci, and this is a theory of human motivation and psychological well-being. And it focuses on intrinsic motivation and identifies three basic psychological needs. First, the need for autonomy, sense of choice and control. Then competence, feeling capable and progressing. And finally, relatedness, feeling connected to others. So when these needs are met, we see higher motivation, persistence, and well-being. What does it mean in practice? So autonomy means giving the learners a choice of topics, tasks, learning pathways, asking them for feedback permanently. Would you be interested to learn this or that? So that they feel that they own the learning process. Then competence, so scaffolded tasks and achievable challenges. And finally, feedback focused on progress and effort. And relatedness, so collaborative activities, peer support, and positive teacher-learner relationships. So how are those frameworks linked? So they both emphasize motivation, which is emotional and psychological, learning as a human and not just cognitive process. SDT explains what drives motivation, and PERMA explains what supports overall well-being and flourishing. Together, they remind us that learning is not just cognitive. So let's recap the key ideas. So what do effective language learning environments entail? They support autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and they foster positive emotion, engagement, and meaning. And well-being is not separate from learning. So now I would like to ask you a question. So there is Paul too.
Here we go. Which of these do you think has the biggest impact on adult language learning? So we have positive emotions, motivation, social connection, or a sense of progress and achievement. hold this open as people are voting. Thank you very much. So I'll just hold it open just another 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And we have 22% for positive emotions, enjoyment, low anxiety, 34% motivation, autonomy, competence, relatedness, 16% social connection, relationships, group dynamic, which might have been my choice, sense of progress and achievement, 28%.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your answers. And I see that motivation is top of the list. So let's continue. So what are the teaching strategies for well-being? How can we support all those important things such as autonomy, competence, relatedness, anxiety reduction, and flow? So we'll look at them one by one. So let's look at the autonomy first of all. Autonomy is very important. So as I said, choice of topics is important. It has to be relevant for the learner's goals and interests. Task-based learning, so not just abstract things. So you won't say, oh, today we'll study the perfect tense. I would say, today you will tell me what you did last weekend, for example, and then it becomes meaningful. And then, of course, choosing the personal goals. So, for example, family, communication, profession, or travel. So let's look at the concept of the zone of proximal development. So this was a psychologist and educationalist, Lev Vygotsky, who defined a range between what learners can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance from a more knowledgeable other. So it can be a teacher today, it could be a language learning app, a book, etc. And this principle underlies modern ideas of scaffolding, cooperative learning, and formative assessment in education. So let's look at those things. So for example, a learner might not be able to hold a conversation independently, but can do it with prompts, model sentences, starts of sentence, ends of sentence, or pair work. So we all know those tasks, insert the endings, insert the missing piece of vocabulary, etc. What is the zone of proximal development? So that's the gap between what a learner can do on their own and what they can do with support. When a task is too easy, there is no learning going on. And if it's too difficult, there will be frustration. So we just need to find this golden middle, the zone where learning happens. So yes, we could go straight into scaffolding. So that is supporting that zone of proximal development by breaking tasks into little steps, giving examples, guiding interaction, and then gradually removing support. So we will typically start a lesson with explaining the concept and then doing some control practice, and at the end do some free practice when the learners feel more confident with a new concept. And this builds confidence, so competence. It reduces anxiety because learners are not asked to do everything at once. It's just step by step, and they can take risks but safely. And this concept of scaffolding is proven to lead to steady progress. Feedback is extremely important. So I never, unless it's a written task, I never give in a classroom individual feedback. There is group feedback. I won't say, John made this mistake, so as a group, I will say, oh yes, this is the typical mistakes, but also I will reframe mistakes as an occasion to learn. So next time we'll say this. And then it is important to empower students with positive feedback. So any good language, any nice pronunciation, it's always important to talk about it. And it is important to summarize the task or session in a positive way. So what I always do, I have a lesson plan, and at the end I'll say, look, we didn't know how to do this at the beginning, but now we can do this, this, and that. And for learners, it's very satisfying to know that. Right. So of course, language is social by nature. We use it for communication. And that's why it is important to include as much communication in the classroom as possible. So things like reading and writing, they are better for homework. In the classroom, we'll do a lot of group work, peer interaction, and there are also now a lot of online communities, wonderful online language learning communities, chats, lots of language apps have this community function inbuilt. In the classroom, it is important to promote a positive group dynamic, encourage students perhaps to do even some projects in common, do homework collaboratively, and all this fosters confidence, and students have a sense of progressing together. So how can you reduce anxiety, which is one of the biggest barriers in adult language learning? It is important to create a safe and low pressure environment. So just being friendly, of course, it's not always a given, but it is important. And then there has to be a good structure in every lesson so that the students know what's going to happen and why it is happening, etc. Of course, equality, diversity, and inclusion are important. So you have to promote cultural diversity in your classroom so that everyone feels included and accepted and happy. And also you have to cater to people with some special needs. So for example, hearing loss. So you have to be a little bit knowledgeable about these things as well, neurodiversity and things like that. So that's a whole big topic I won't touch upon because we don't have that much time. And it is important to adopt a non-judgmental approach. And we'll aim to create a sense of flow in a language classroom. So I always think if you ever played in an orchestra or sang in the choir. So for me, it's a bit like that. So at the beginning, everyone comes in with their diverse, emotions, a lot going on with their lives, and then we'll do a little warm up, and everyone will be sort of on the same level, tuned in, and then we will give them some tasks with a balance of challenge and skill. I aim for a deep engagement state, so the lesson has to be interesting and engaging, but you have to vary between short immersive tasks, easy and difficult, so that it's not too easy, not too difficult. You have to find a good balance of that. So let's talk about the wider learning ecosystem, so independent learners, culture, and teacher well-being. So nowadays there are a lot of resources available to language learners. That's wonderful. There are a lot of language learning apps. I wrote 2 little articles for the Linguist magazine on those. I tested quite a few and I enjoyed them. So definitely that adds another tool to language learning. It is important for an independent learner to have a personal goal, to reflect regularly on how you achieve your goal, And then the online communities can and are important and supportive. The role of culture is immense, so a learner will feel a much greater connection to a language through literature, film, music, and art. Some people are interested in history and politics, and some people may have some roots in that country, so it's important for them to explore their own cultural identity. Creativity is very important, so it has to be enjoyable. Literature, songs, films are very important, especially for advanced learners. Games are enjoyed immensely, not only by children, but by adults a lot. So everyone loves a bingo game, a dictionary game, riddles, poems, anything. Role play is a hugely popular task, and creative writing, of course, is also very good for higher levels. And how about the teachers? So the teachers have to look after themselves too, because they are busy professionals and they have to look after themselves and avoid burnouts, because it will affect their teaching and the learners, and it shapes the classroom climate. You have to be a positive role model and also learn from your students. I think I've learned more from my students probably than they have learned from me. And finally, so what is the key message of this presentation? So well-being is not an add-on, it's the foundation of effective language learning. It's not only a cognitive, but an emotional and social process. So well-being drives motivation, engagement, and persistence. So the cornerstones of well-being are autonomy, competency, and connectedness. And teaching is not just delivering content, vocabulary, and grammar, it's shaping learning experiences. So let me just conclude the talk. Adult learners bring complex lives, motivations, and emotional realities into the classroom. And emotions such as anxiety, confidence, enjoyment directly affect learning. And frameworks that we have seen, such as PERMA and SDT, help us understand what supports success. And thoughtful teaching can reduce anxiety, build confidence, and foster connections. Language learning becomes more than a skill, and it is a wonderful space for growth, identity, and connection. So language learning is not just about words, it's about people. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to reply to them.
Thank you very much, Anna. We've got some questions coming in. How do you manage differing motivations, interest in the classroom to optimize learning? So yeah, how do you manage people at different levels of motivation and interest in the language they're learning?
Well, different levels and motive. So, okay, I think you have to foster motivation. So when an adult learner starts a language, they are very motivated generally, otherwise they don't start. And then you have to maintain it. And in order to maintain interest, the lesson has to be relevant, has to be pleasant, has to be interesting. So I think it's just through effective teaching, and the student has to have a sense of progress and achievement that will motivate them. And of course, for adult learners, you know, if they have some friends in the classroom, they will come to see their friends.
Very good. Okay, so a number of comments coming in about the challenges of learning as an adult compared to when you're younger. So, for example, adults don't learn very easily unless what they learn is immediately applicable. I understand that. A question here: how can we measure the well-being of learners? So, are there any ways we can actually determine their level of well-being?
Well, there are questionnaires, of course, that psychologists apply to to the well-being, but in a classroom we can't measure the well-being with the methods of psychology. So I think it's just measuring how engaged the students are, and just how much enjoyment there is if people are smiling, if people are laughing, if they are, you know, just enrolling for the next term. Really, that's how you measure their well-being. They won't come back if they don't feel well in a classroom.
Fantastic. Okay, there's quite a few more questions coming in, but I'm just conscious of sticking to time, and I do know we have one last poll as well to run before we close the session. So shall I run that now, Anna?
Yes, or if you prefer, yes. Okay, let's do that. Let's do the
We'll
poll.
just do that. We've just come up to 10:40 now. So what is one change you are most likely to apply to your teaching or learning practice for the teachers here, or for your learning, of course? And we have lots of language learners attending as well. So, well, this is looking fairly evenly split. We'll keep it open a little bit longer. Thank you for the comments coming in as well. By the way, lots of nice comments coming in about the session. Okay, I think we'll hold this open just another couple of seconds. There's still votes coming in. 3, 2, 1. So, giving learners more choice, autonomy is 18%. The highest, focusing more on confidence and progress, 37%. Creating more interaction and connection, 26%, and reducing anxiety, creating a safer environment, 19%. So thank you very, very much for that. And thank you, Anna, for the fascinating presentation.